Hello and welcome. Could the founding of Israel have been based on a total misunderstanding of history? One Israeli historian has created huge controversy with his findings that the idea of a single Jewish tribe is wrong, and that much of the justification for the founding of the Jewish state of Israel is actually political. When the nation of Israel came into existence in 1948, it was the culmination of centuries of dedication by Jewish nationalists to the idea that their people must return to a land from which they'd been exiled almost 2,000 years earlier. But many modern archaeologists and historians have begun to doubt whether or not this event really happened. Other discoveries are shedding new light on key past events of the Jewish people in the Holy Land and creating some uncomfortable dilemmas for those who live there now. So today we ask, do new perspectives on Israel's past require a new vision of its future? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. You can send an SMS or email, and we'll welcome your phone calls on the show as well. Joining me to discuss this from London, his theories and the controversy he's stirring, is Shlomo Sand, a professor of contemporary history at Tel Aviv University and author of the book The Invention of the Jewish People, which was on the bestseller list in Israel for several months and has recently been translated into English. Professor Sand also teaches at the University of California at Berkeley and the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales in Paris. Professor Sand, thanks very much for coming on the show. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Sir, I have to start off with a quote from your book where you say, or giving the reason why you write it, you say, "I could not have gone on living in Israel without writing this book. I don't think books can change the world, but when the world begins to change, it searches for different books." Considering what you've written in this book, you can't be very popular among many Israelis right now, and I wonder what difference you think you're going to make putting these views forward. What difference will it make to the situation in Israel?
As I said, I am not sure that books can change the world. But, you know, with this conflict, without ending this conflict, I have a pessimist position. But I thought that it's very important to say something about myth that give birth of the Israeli state, and why this myth that helped to create Israel, this same myth can destroy Israel. You see, this ethnic myth. And this is a part of my book.
Well, Professor, you ask your readers to take a clear and unbiased look at Israel, to consider your views and the validity of your argument. And I wonder, considering the history and how loaded the history of Israel is and how entrenched people are in their views of how important Israel is to them, how can they look so in an unbiased way? How can they step back from what they're so conditioned to think about?
You know, I don't know exactly, but I think that as a historian I have to put some truth in the narrative of the Israeli foundation. As I am writing in my book, it's very important to understand. You spoke before about the exile. You know, everybody in the street in Washington and London or in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv knows that the Jewish were expelled 2,000 years from Palestine or Judah, and they come back after 2,000 years. I think it was a myth, a legend. It's not a historical truth, and I try to prove it in my book. You see, it doesn't change the fact that Israel exists today, but all the justification, the historical justification of the Zionist colonization, I put on question in my book.
Professor, your book has been
can help today.
Right. Well, I was going to say your book has been a bestseller for months. Your book has been a bestseller for months in Israel. What has been the reaction of people? Though obviously there's many who will buy it out of curiosity, but what has been the reaction? Are there those who see you as a traitor, for example, to the Jewish cause?
Yeah. You see, the Israelis are not in the same view. A lot of young people in Tel Aviv bought the book. It's become a bestseller. A lot of journalists, by the way, and in the TV programs invite me to every program and to discuss the book. It was a very large curiosity. There were also attacks, and you know, not everybody. I arrived to an age to know that not everybody can love me, but I didn't try to be loved by everybody. But it's very interesting. You know, I don't think that Israel is real democracy in the sense that it's not a state of its citizens, but it's a state, a very liberal and open society, not during the wars, but usually, in the curiosity and face of my book was very, very large, and this is the reason that it's become a bestseller. How people read it, I don't know. I got a lot of letters, you see, very interesting letters about the question, and I think there is a generation today in Israel that don't need historical justification to continue to live in Tel Aviv.
It's interesting you said at the beginning. It's interesting you say at the beginning of the show, Professor, that the same myth that created Israel could also destroy it. Now, I want to quote from your book where you talk about how Israel may be isolated. You say, to what extent is Jewish Israeli society willing to discard the deeply embedded image of the chosen people and cease isolating itself in the name of a fanciful history or dubious biology and excluding the other from its midst? Now, I wonder if your views on Jewish history do ever become so widely accepted that there is a majority accepting that kind of view. What difference do you think it will make in the way Israel moves forward? How do you think your views could change Israel's direction if they were accepted widely?
I think that Israel arrived to an age that it can be much more normal and much more democratic. In which sense? Because you see, my position in the end of the book, not only because the historical analyze, but because of the future of the area, I think it's very important to understand that Israel has to become a society of its citizens, Jewish, Arabs. You know, in the 67 borders, in the Arab world except Israel in the 67 borders, it has to become a normal democratic state. Then I think that we have to liberate ourselves from these ideas that we are a people race that, you know, come back after 2,000 years. I think it's a myth, as I said before. And I think that Israel has to stop to be a Jewish state and to become an Israeli state of its citizens, in that the Arab citizens in Israel will feel like a Jew is feeling in London or in Washington. This is one of my political dreams, you know, that my little book will contribute to change the Israeli society.
I just want to put two questions we got by email to you. We had many emails. In fact, we had probably more emails and responses to this show than we've had in a long time. Two I will put to you. One from Ali Hassan in Sweden, who wrote in saying, the problem with Israel is that it is a fake state. Israel does not have roots in the soil. Because of this reason, it faces a threat to its existence. Israel needs war, not peace, to remain on the world's map. And then another email that came in from Sinan Chetinkaya says, Israel is governed by Zionism, not by a government chosen by people. Zionism will not stop until the dream of greater Israel is built. Who do you feel is really driving that dream of a greater Israel? Who's really driving the strong elements of the Zionist movement in this day and age in Israel, Professor?
Okay, I want to make it clear. I am very Israeli, but I am not a Zionist. I don't believe that this state has to be a Zionist state, a state of the Jewish in the world. I want that it will become. Israel is a fact. Now, about the first question, you know, we have to understand that Israel exists, and we have to accept the fact that it's a state. It's not a fake state. All the states are fake. You know, the Iraqi state is not less a fake than the Israeli state. The Jordanian state is not less fake than the Israeli state. The Israeli state is a product of Zionist colonization. We have to admit it. You see, we came from other places, and we take the land of Palestine. But it's become a historical fact that partly we have to accept it. It's not a fake state. In the person that wrote in the email, it's a fake state. You know, most of the Israelis fight for the existence of this state, and it's not a fake state.
Right.
Now, I want to change this state. I want to make it a state of all the citizens. And I think that the future of Israel in the Middle East depends on this changing of the characteristic of this state.
I have to put another email. Professor, well, it's okay. No, I have to put another email to you, which is an interesting one that came from Michigan here in the USA, from Linda Taylor, who wrote into our Facebook page saying, "Youth being youth, of course, don't hate each other. But if you are a young adult in Israel, you have to spend time in the military, where you learn real fast to dehumanize people." And I wonder, how have you noticed the reaction among young Israelis to your ideas and your research?
You know, a lot of people don't like the ideas that I put forward, but there are a lot of other Israelis, not enough in my point of view, but they are not, you know, against living with Arabs. I know, to speak about my students, I have a lot of students in Tel Aviv University that have quite different opinion of the government and of a lot of racists in Israel. I am not sure to be optimistic because of it, but you have to understand that there are a lot of Israelis. There are Israelis that are not racist like other one. I want to live in Israel with Arab citizens, with the Palestinians. You know, I am for a Palestinian state besides the Israeli state. And as I say, that I try to make Israel a state of its citizens. With these letters and the emails, I don't understand one thing. Not a fake state, because every state in the world started as a fake, and it was based on myth. And secondly, I think that you know, you cannot push away the Israelis. It's very dangerous to put on question the existence of Israel. I want to change Israel, and I try to do it with all the means that I have.
Professor, we're going to take a very short break. As I go to this break, I want to quote your book again on an issue you've been talking about. We'll get back to discuss it when I get back. But in your book, when you talk about the ancient records of Jewish people, you say, "The ancient Egyptians keep meticulous records of every event, and there is a great deal of documentation about the kingdom's political and military life. Yet there is not a single mention of any children of Israel who lived in Egypt or rebelled against it or emigrated from it at any time." I'm going to ask you about this fragility of the expulsion when we return. Stay tuned. More of our discussion when we're right back. Welcome back. We're discussing a provocative new perspective on Israel's past that questions the traditional history of the Jewish people and envisions a different future for everyone living in the region. Joining me from London is Shlomo Sand, Professor of Contemporary History at Tel Aviv University and author of the book The Invention of the Jewish People, which has just been released in English after causing a political storm in Israel, spending 19 weeks on the bestseller list. As we get back to our discussion, George in the UK has been waiting very patiently. George, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, one of my colleagues actually forwarded me some online information about your book, and I read some transcript online, and it said something which was shocking to me, and this is that you are saying that most of the Jews are actually not Semites. I mean, I don't know if you could please just fill us in about this. If I read it correctly, maybe I misread it. And the second question is, I just heard you saying that you would like to live in Israel, in an Israeli state, not a Zionist Jewish state, alongside the Palestinians. But then, what happens when the Palestinians vote democratically for a militant government like Hamas, and then the Israelis, who are very good friends of the UN, depose that government and install a secular...
George, two interesting questions. I'm going to start with the first one to Professor. The Semitic history of Israelis or Jews in Israel. Go ahead.
No, I don't think that the Jewish are Semitic. We can start with something that I mentioned before. The exile of the Jew in the first century of our era didn't happen. There is not any scientific research book about the exile. It's a myth, the exile of the Jew, and I think that most of the Jews in the world came from conversion, massive conversion, from the beginning of the first century till the 18th century. Jewishness was the first proselyte monotheism, and most of the Jews are descendant of conversion and not of racist descendant from the ancient Hebrew. This I hope that I answer you. I think that the Berbers in North Africa become Jew were in North Africa before the Arabs arrived there. I think that the Jews were in Ukraine before most of the Russians were there. And so on and so on. Yes, the Jewish are not Semitic. Most of them are not Semitic. This is for the first question. For the second question, it was about...
yeah, so if the second question was about if Palestinians and Israelis were to live together in a United States. Yeah.
No, I didn't... I think that it is misunderstanding. I don't think in this step of history, in this time of history, we can politically thinking about a one solution state. I think that the Israeli army has to be drawn up from all the occupied territory. I think that a Palestinian state has to exist beside Israel, but it's very important to understand that Israel has to be an Israeli state, not a Jewish state. Israel has to belong to everybody that is living and working in Israel and not the Jewish in the world. Now, about Hamas and about this threat menace that the Hamas will govern, I am speaking about two states. I think that these two states have to be confederate, because we cannot live in the Middle East without Arabs. No. If somebody in Israel don't want to live without Arabs, he has to leave the Middle East. But I'm speaking about two-state solution.
Professor, interestingly, interestingly, we had an email that came from Greece. If I could put this to you, from Vicky Nikolaidis, who says, I'm curious as to how the centuries which evolved before Judaism on the land of modern Palestine can be ignored by the archaeological history. Now, I wonder, you also say, if I'm correct in your book, that many of the Palestinians who were there on the land were actually converted from Judaism as well.
Not only this, it's not me. You know, a lot of people criticize me that I pretend that Palestinians are the real Jew. Not at all. It's David Ben-Gurion and others, first Zionists, that when they arrived to Palestine, they were sure that the Arab peasant in place are the descendant of the ancient Hebrew. It's not Shlomo Sand, it's David Ben-Gurion that till 1929 believed that the Arab peasant are the descendant of the ancient Hebrew, and they were converted from Judaism to Islam in the 7th century after Jesus Christ. It's not me that put it forward, and I believe that Ben-Gurion was more or less right. I mean, I don't believe that the Palestinians today are the direct descendant of the ancient Hebrew. They are mixed like every other people. But the chance that a member of Hamas in Hebron will be a descendant of the ancient Hebrew, ancient Jew, is much more greater than my affiliation to this.
Now, Professor, it's interesting. There's a lot of times when we've discussed the issue of Zionism on this show, there are those who have the view that those living outside Israel, the Jewish people, many of the Jewish people living outside Israel, are more hardline and Zionist than those within Israel, that those who live on the ground there in the Middle East and see the reality are actually a little more liberal in their view on how things are. Do you find that to be the case, that those who are outside are actually more protective of Israel, even though they don't live there?
Yes, sometimes. I don't want to generalize, but to compare the reception of the book for example, by the established Jewish in Paris and by the Israelis, it's much more easier for me in Israel than in Paris. Now, there is a lot of Zionists that are much less liberal than the Israel society, and they think that by putting in question the historical origin of the Jew, I put in question the existence of Israel. Now, they are much more patriots sometimes than the Israelis themselves. Yeah.
Let me put an email to you that came from Ansar Bakshi, and this brings us in some ways full circle to the debate and some of the ideas you've put forward. Ansar Bakshi wrote in saying, do you feel there is an ineradicable culture of belligerence towards any peacemaking efforts in Israel? And if not, what can be done to make tangible progress and changing the mindset of the country? How do you think Israelis' minds can be changed?
Well, I try to prophesize the past, not the future. It's difficult to be a prophet, you see. But what can change? You see, I'm not sure about it. You see, I think that Israel is not looking today for peace. You know, as I said before, today the Arab world more or less accept the existence of this state. But this state don't want to be integrated in the Middle East. What can make the Israelis to be more sure about themselves, to accept the otherness? I don't know exactly, you see. I'm Israeli citizens that try to live in the Middle East. I think that the future of the Israelis is to live with the Palestinians. How to do it, really, I don't know. You know, I don't know if it will come with the pressure from outside, but Israel has to quickly change before the next catastrophe.
Okay, we have 1 minute to go, and Shazan's on the line from Pakistan. Go ahead.
Yeah. Do you think the painful history of the Holocaust should be used in any way as a justification for Israel to possess nuclear weapons?
Okay, Professor?
Not at all. Not at all. I don't think that suffering of the past can justify suffering of the present. Holocaust cannot justify nothing. It has to be remembered as one of the biggest tragedy in history. But it, you know, it doesn't justify that somebody will have a nuclear and menace the other one to you know, Holocaust is not a justification of nothing at all.
Professor, thank you very much for being with us. The Invention of the Jewish People is the book by Professor Shlomo Sand. Thank you for sending in your questions. Remember, you can follow the show on Facebook and see what we're up to there, and you can give us feedback on what we're broadcasting and post your questions and comments. On the next show, Honduras' political crisis. The election is over. How truly free and fair was it, and where does the country go from here? Be sure to tune in for that with your questions from me and the team. Until then, we'll see you next time.